The poison was already in the glass when Elena noticed. She'd been refilling water goblets at table 7 when her peripheral vision caught the movement. Subtle, practiced, deliberate. A man in a gray suit leaning across the adjacent booth, his hand hovering over a crystal tumbler for just a second too long. The gesture was so smooth that anyone watching the dining room's elegant chaos would have missed it entirely. But Elena saw everything. She always did. When you couldn't speak, you learned to read the world differently. You watched hands, eyes, the tension in shoulders, the micro-expressions that flickered across faces before people remembered to mask them. Silence had made her a ghost in rooms full of noise, and ghosts saw things the living overlooked. The man in the gray suit straightened, adjusted his tie, and walked toward the restrooms with unhurried confidence. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs as her gaze shifted to the poisoned glass, then to the man sitting alone at the corner table, the intended victim. She'd seen him before. Everyone at Lumiere had. Kim Jae-won didn't dine at the restaurant often, but when he did, the entire staff moved with military precision. He was the kind of wealthy that made people nervous, the kind of powerful that came with armed security waiting in black cars outside. Even now, 2 men in dark suits stood by the entrance, scanning the room with expressions carved from stone. Jae-won himself sat with perfect posture, his suit probably worth more than Elena's annual salary, his face a study in controlled indifference as he reviewed something on his tablet. His dark hair was swept back precisely, and his features carried that particular blend of classical handsomeness and cold calculation that made him seem untouchable, dangerous, and completely unaware that death waited in a glass 3 feet from his hand. Elena's fingers tightened around the water pitcher. Her manager would fire her for approaching an important guest without being summoned. The security team might tackle her if she moved too quickly. But if she did nothing, if she simply walked away and pretended not to notice, his hand reached for the glass. Elena moved. She crossed the distance between tables in 4 quick steps, her server's training making the movement look natural even as her pulse thundered in her ears. She reached his table just as his fingers closed around the crystal stem. Her hand shot out, steady despite the terror flooding her system, and she switched the glasses in one fluid motion, the poisoned tumbler now safely away from his lips, replaced with a clean one from her tray. Jae-won's hand froze. His eyes lifted to hers, and Elena felt the impact of his gaze like a physical force. Dark, sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. Eyes that were now locked on hers with an intensity that made breathing difficult. She couldn't explain, couldn't warn him with words. All she had were her eyes, wide with urgency, and the desperate hope that he would understand. For 3 seconds that felt like hours. They stared at each other. The restaurant's ambient noise, clinking silverware, murmured conversations, soft jazz from hidden speakers, faded into a distant hum. There was only his face, the question forming behind his analytical gaze, and the frantic message she was trying to transmit through expression alone. Then his security chief appeared at the table, moving with the swift purpose of a man paid to sense danger. "Mr. Kim, is there a problem?" Jae-won's attention hadn't shifted from Elena's face. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower than she'd expected, with a texture like expensive whiskey. "She switched my drink." The security chief's hand moved toward his jacket. Elena's stomach dropped. "Sir..." "Carefully," Jae-won interrupted, still watching Elena. "Very carefully, I want you to test the glass she removed. All of you, step back from the table. Now." The authority in his voice moved people like a physical push. Servers scattered. The security chief produced a small device from his jacket, some kind of chemical testing kit, and held it over the poisoned glass that Elena had set down on the far edge of the table. The device beeped, once, twice, then emitted a sharp, sustained alarm that cut through the restaurant's atmosphere like a blade. "Arsenic compound," the security chief said, his face going pale. Lethal concentration. The restaurant erupted into controlled chaos. More security materialized from nowhere. The manager rushed over, his face cycling through confusion, horror, and panic. Guests were ushered toward exits. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Through it all, Jae-won remained seated, his gaze never leaving Elena's face. She stood frozen, her hands trembling now that the adrenaline was crashing, her mind screaming at her to run, to hide, to disappear before anyone decided she was part of the threat rather than the solution. "Who is she?" Jae-won asked his security chief, though the question felt directed at Elena herself. "One of the servers, sir. Started working here about 6 months ago. Background check was clean." "Name?" "Elena. Elena Santos, sir." "Why can't she speak?" A pause. The security chief glanced at the manager who had appeared at his elbow, wringing his hands. "She's mute, Mr. Kim. Has been since she started. Uses a notepad to communicate with kitchen staff." Jae-won's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or calculation. He rose from his chair with the fluid grace of a man accustomed to controlling every room he entered, and suddenly he was standing directly in front of Elena, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something dark and expensive that probably had a pretentious name she'd never's. "Remember, you knew," he said quietly. "Not a question, a statement of fact. You saw someone poison my drink, and you saved my life." Elena nodded, her throat tight with fear, and a dozen words she'd never be able to speak. "The man who did it," Jae-won continued, his voice dropping even lower. "Can you identify him?" Another nod. Her hands moved instinctively, sketching the air, gray suit, tall, brown hair, before she remembered that gestures meant nothing to people who'd never learned to read them. Frustrated, she looked around for paper, for anything to write on. Jae-won pulled a phone from his pocket, opened a notes app, and handed it to her without hesitation. His fingers brushed hers in the exchange, and Elena felt an electric jolt that had nothing to do with fear. She typed quickly, "Gray suit, left side of restaurant, brown hair, mustache, went to bathroom before you reached for glass, tall, maybe 6'2", scar on left hand." Jae-won read the description, then handed the phone to his security chief. "Find him, now, and pull all security footage from the last hour." "Yes, sir." The security chief barked orders into his radio, and half the team dispersed like hunting dogs released on a scent. Elena's manager appeared at her elbow, his face flushed and anxious. "Mr. Kim, I assure you we had no idea. Elena has been a model employee, but if she's caused any trouble—" "She saved my life," Jae-won interrupted, his tone carrying enough edge to make the manager step back. "Which means she's now in danger. Someone paid to have me killed tonight. That someone will know their plan failed. They'll want to eliminate witnesses." The words hit Elena like cold water. She hadn't thought past the immediate crisis, hadn't considered what came after. But of course there would be consequences. You didn't try to murder a man like Kim Jae-won without backup plans and loose-end management. She was now the loose end. Her hands started shaking again. Jae-won noticed. Of course he did. Those dark eyes tracked every micro-movement, catalogued every reaction. "You'll come with me," he said, and it wasn't a question or a request. It was a decision already made, delivered with the absolute certainty of a man who expected compliance. Elena shook her head frantically, backing away. Her apartment was small and shabby, but it was hers. Safe. Anonymous. She couldn't just leave with a stranger no matter how expensive his suit or how compelling his reasons. It wasn't a suggestion. Jae-won moved closer, and Elena found herself trapped between his presence and the wall behind her. He wasn't touching her, but she felt surrounded anyway, enveloped by the sheer force of his will. "In approximately 10 minutes, the police will want statements. In 20 minutes, news outlets will have your face. In an hour, whoever hired that assassin will know exactly who you are and where you live. You have 2 choices. Come with me to somewhere secure, or spend the rest of your very short life looking over your shoulder." Elena's chest tightened. She fumbled for the phone he'd given her earlier, typing with trembling fingers. I can disappear. I've done it before. Jae-won read the message, and something like anger flashed across his features. You think disappearing will save you from the kind of people who poison drinks in 5-star restaurants? They have resources you can't imagine. Money that makes problems vanish. If they want you dead, you'll be dead. And no amount of hiding in cheap motels will change that. The bluntness should have terrified her more. Instead, it cut through her panic with cold clarity. He was right. She knew he was right. The man in the gray suit had moved with professional precision. This wasn't some crime of passion or desperate gamble. This was organized, funded, deadly. Why do you care? She typed. You don't know me. Jae-won's jaw tightened. For a moment he looked away, and Elena caught a glimpse of something beneath the icy exterior, something raw and barely contained. When he looked back, his eyes held hers with uncomfortable intensity. You saved my life, he said quietly. That makes you my responsibility, and I protect what's mine. The possessiveness in those last words sent heat crawling up Elena's neck. She wasn't his. She wasn't anyone's. But the certainty in his voice, the absolute conviction, made her feel something she hadn't felt in years. Safe. Before she could type a response, the security chief returned, his expression grim. The target fled. We have footage, but he knew where the cameras were. Professional. We're running facial recognition, but I'd estimate he's already across state lines. Double the security detail, Jae-won ordered. I want surveillance on Mrs. Santos's apartment, her usual routes, anyone she's been in contact with. And prepare the north penthouse. She'll be staying there until this is resolved. Sir, the security chief hesitated. The north penthouse is your private residence. I'm aware. Jae-won's tone brooked no argument. It's the most secure location I own, and I'll be able to monitor the situation personally. Make it happen. Elena's fingers flew across the phone screen. I can't stay in your home. That's insane. You're a stranger. Jae-won read the message and almost smiled. Almost. The corner of his mouth twitched in what might have been amusement if his eyes weren't so serious. 2 hours ago, I was a stranger. Now I'm the man whose life you saved, and who's trying to save yours in return. We're past normal social conventions, Elena. The sound of her name in his voice did something strange to her nervous system. He pronounced it correctly. Elena, not the Americanized Ulina, with a slight accent. That suggested he spoke more than one language fluently. It felt intimate, hearing her name shaped by his mouth, and she hated how much she noticed it. The restaurant had mostly emptied now. Police had arrived and were interviewing staff. A detective was heading their way, notepad in hand, expression professionally neutral. Jae-won's security chief intercepted him smoothly, speaking in low tones, but Elena could see the detective's eyes shifting toward her with interest. We need to leave, Jae-won said. Now, before you become the story, instead of a footnote. His hand settled on the small of her back, warm through the thin fabric of her server's uniform, and Elena felt that touch reverberate through her entire body. Trust me, just for tonight. If you want to leave tomorrow, I won't stop you. It was the last part that decided her, the acknowledgement that she had a choice, even if the options were terrible. Elena nodded once, sharp and quick, and let herself be guided toward the restaurant's back exit, where a black car waited with running engine and tinted windows. The drive through the city passed in surreal silence. Elena sat in the back seat next to Jae-won, acutely aware of the minimal space between them, the way his presence seemed to fill the entire vehicle despite his stillness. He'd removed his suit jacket, and she could see the lines of his shoulders through his crisp white shirt, the controlled strength in his frame. He wasn't bulky, but there was a leanness to him that suggested discipline. Control. You're terrified, he said without looking at her. It wasn't a question. Elena didn't bother denying it. She pulled out her phone and typed, Wouldn't you be? Yes. The honesty surprised her. I've survived 3 assassination attempts. The fear doesn't go away. You just learn to function through it. 3? Elena typed, eyes widening. Occupational hazard of running a multi-billion-dollar empire. Everyone wants what you have. Some are willing to kill for it. He finally turned to look at her, and in the car's dim interior, his features seemed softer somehow. Less intimidating, almost human. You get used to trusting no one, expecting betrayal, and then someone like you appears and risks everything to save a stranger's life for no reason at all. I had a reason, Elena typed. I'm not a murderer. I couldn't just watch you die. Jae-won stared at the message for a long moment. Most people would have looked away, convinced themselves it wasn't their problem. Self-preservation is a powerful instinct. So is compassion, Elena wrote back. Something shifted in his expression. A crack in the armor, so brief she almost missed it. Is it? He murmured, more to himself than to her. Then, louder, we're here. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a gleaming tower that seemed to pierce the night sky. The elevator required both a key, card, and a fingerprint scan. When the doors finally opened directly into the apartment, Elena stepped into a space that looked like it belonged in an architecture magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the glittering city below. The furniture was all clean lines and expensive materials. Leather, chrome, dark wood. Abstract art hung on the walls, pieces she suspected were originals worth more than her lifetime earnings. It was beautiful, intimidating. Nothing like the cramped studio apartment she'd left behind. The guest suite is through there, Jae-won said, gesturing to a hallway. It has its own bathroom, walk-in closet. My assistant will bring clothes that fit you tomorrow. For tonight, he disappeared into another room and returned with a black t-shirt and sweatpants. These will have to do. Elena took the clothes, her fingers brushing his again, that same electric sensation making her breath catch. She typed quickly. Thank you for all of this. I know you didn't have to. Stop. Jae-won's voice was firm. You don't owe me gratitude for basic human decency. You saved my life. This is the absolute minimum I can do in return. But Elena could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw tightened. This wasn't easy for him either, having someone in his space, his sanctuary. She wondered how long it had been since he'd invited anyone into his home, let alone a mute waitress he'd met hours ago under the worst possible circumstances. I'll stay out of your way, she typed. I promise, you won't even know I'm here. Jae-won's laugh was short and humorless. I'll know. His eyes held hers for a beat too long, and Elena felt heat flood her cheeks. I always know when someone's watching. The words should have sounded threatening. Instead, they felt like a confession. Elena didn't sleep that first night. She lay in the guest suite's enormous bed, wrapped in sheets that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and stared at the ceiling while her mind replayed everything. The poison, the switch, Jae-won's eyes, the way he'd said mine like he meant it. She should be more frightened, should be planning her escape. Instead, she kept thinking about the crack in his armor when she'd mentioned compassion, like the word itself was foreign to him. Morning came with soft light filtering through automated blinds. Elena found a note slipped under her door, written in precise handwriting. Kitchen is stocked. Help yourself. I'll be in my office. Don't leave the penthouse. Not a request. An order. Elena should have bristled at the commanding tone, but something about the directness was almost comforting. No games. No manipulation. Just clear expectations. She ventured out in Jae-won's borrowed clothes, the sweatpants rolled at the ankles, the t-shirt hanging loose on her frame. The kitchen was spotless, all stainless steel and marble, with a refrigerator that could feed a small army. Elena made coffee and toast, moving quietly out of habit, then froze when she realized Jae-won was watching her from the doorway. He'd changed into casual clothes, dark jeans and a gray Henley that clung to his chest in ways that made Elena's mouth go dry. His hair was slightly damp, like he'd just showered, and without the armor of his business suit, he looked younger. Still dangerous, but more human. "You're very quiet," he said, then seemed to realize the absurdity of the statement. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Force of habit, I suppose. You move like you're trying not to exist." Elena's fingers tightened around her coffee mug. She had no way to respond, no notepad nearby, and she hated feeling so helpless. Hated that he could speak and she couldn't, that every conversation required props and patience. Jae-won seemed to understand. He crossed to a drawer, pulled out a small notepad and pen, and placed them on the counter in front of her. "Keep these with you. I want to hear what you're thinking." "Here?" Elena wrote, raising an eyebrow. Poor word choice. He poured himself coffee, leaning against the counter across from her, close enough that she could smell his soap, something clean and masculine that made her pulse quicken. "But you communicate perfectly well without words. Last night you told me an entire story with just your eyes. Warning, fear, determination. I've never been able to read anyone so clearly." Elena's hand trembled as she wrote. "Most people don't try." "Most people are idiots." Jae-won took a sip of coffee, studying her over the rim. "You're different. Not just the silence, the way you observe, like you're collecting data on everyone around you." "Survival skill," Elena wrote. "When you can't speak, you learn to read rooms. Body language, micro-expressions. It's how you stay safe. And yet, you still intervened last night, put yourself directly in danger to save someone you didn't know." His eyes narrowed. "Why?" Elena hesitated, pen hovering over paper. How could she explain something she barely understood herself? Finally, she wrote, "I watched my father die when I was 8. Couldn't scream for help. Couldn't call 911. Just watched. Maybe last night was my chance to change the ending." The silence that followed felt heavy. Jae-won set down his coffee cup with deliberate care, his expression unreadable. "Your father. That's when you stopped speaking?" Elena nodded, her throat tight with old grief. "I'm sorry." The words were simple, but something in his voice made them land differently. Sincere. Like he understood loss in ways most people didn't. "And I'm sorry that you're in danger now, because you chose to be brave." "Not your fault," Elena wrote quickly. "Maybe not, but I'm still going to fix it." He pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. "My security team found the man from the restaurant. He's already left the country, but we have connections. We'll know who hired him within 48 hours. And then what?" "Then I eliminate the threat." Jae-won's tone went cold, and Elena saw the billionaire businessman again, the man who'd built an empire through calculated ruthlessness. Permanently. Elena should have been disturbed by the casual way he discussed violence. Instead, she felt a dangerous flutter of something warmer. Protection. He was offering protection, and she hadn't realized how desperately she craved it until this moment. The next 3 days fell into an unexpected rhythm. Jae-won worked from his home office, conducting video conferences in Korean, English, and what sounded like Mandarin. Elena explored the penthouse carefully, reading his bookshelves, an eclectic mix of philosophy, military strategy, and classical literature, and watching the city from the massive windows. They ate meals together. Breakfast was quiet, both of them gradually waking. Dinner was when Jae-won seemed to unwind slightly, asking her questions that required written answers. He wanted to know everything. Her childhood in California, her mother who'd died when she was 12, the years she'd spent moving from city to city trying to outrun her past. "You've been running a long time," he observed one evening over takeout Thai food. "Does it ever work?" "No," Elena wrote. "You can't outrun yourself." "No," Jae-won agreed quietly. "You can't." Something haunted crossed his face, gone before she could fully process it. I've tried. Elena waited, hoping he'd elaborate. When he didn't, she wrote, "What are you running from?" Expectations. Legacy. The weight of a name that means more than the person carrying it. He set down his chopsticks, meeting her eyes. My father built our company from nothing. Made billions. And then he died, and suddenly I was 25 years old, responsible for thousands of employees and a reputation I didn't earn. Everyone expected me to fail. To be a pale copy of a great man. Did you fail? Elena wrote, though she already knew the answer. No, I became something worse. His smile was bitter. I became exactly what they expected. Cold, calculating, ruthless. The kind of man who makes enemies powerful enough to hire assassins. He paused. The kind of man who forgets that compassion exists until a mute waitress risks her life to save his. Elena's heart clenched. She wrote quickly, "You're not as cold as you think." How would you know? Because cold men don't learn their employees' names. Don't make sure I have coffee in the morning. Don't ask about my past like it matters. Jae-won stared at the note for a long moment. When he looked up, his eyes held something raw and unguarded. It does matter. You matter. I don't know why, but you do. The air between them felt charged, electric. Elena's breath caught as Jae-won stood, moving around the table until he was close enough to touch. He didn't reach for her, but she felt the pull of him like gravity. I should apologize, he said quietly, for keeping you here, for making decisions without asking. But I'm not sorry, Elena, because having you here, in my space, watching me with those eyes that see too much. He stopped, jaw tightening. It's the first time in years I've felt human. Elena's hands shook as she wrote, I feel safe with you. I shouldn't. You're practically a stranger. But I do. We're past strangers. Jae-won's voice dropped lower. Intimate. Strangers don't save each other's lives. Don't share meals and secrets. Don't. His hand lifted, hovering near her face, and Elena's entire body tensed with anticipation. Don't want to touch each other this badly. Elena's breath came faster. She should step back. Should maintain distance. Instead, she leaned into his almost touch, closing the final inch between his palm and her cheek. The contact was electric. Jae-won's hand was warm, slightly calloused, cradling her face with unexpected gentleness. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, and Elena's eyes fluttered closed at the sensation. No one had touched her like this in years, like she was precious, worth protecting. Look at me, Jae-won murmured, and Elena opened her eyes to find his face inches from hers, his gaze intense and searching. I need you to understand something. The people who want me dead, they're dangerous, professional. And now that you're connected to me, they'll come for you. Staying here puts you at risk. Leaving puts you at risk. There's no safe option. Elena grabbed her notepad with trembling hands. Then I choose to stay. Why? She wrote 3 words that felt like jumping off a cliff. I trust you. Something broke in Jae-won's expression. The careful control, the icy composure. It all shattered, and suddenly his forehead was pressed against hers, his breathing ragged. You shouldn't, he whispered. I'm not a good man, Elena. I've done things. Elena pressed her fingers to his lips, silencing him. When he opened his eyes, she pointed to herself, then to him, then made a gesture over her heart. I see you, the motion said. Really see you, and I'm not afraid. You should be. But even as Jae-won said it, his other hand found her waist, pulling her closer until their bodies were nearly touching. God, you should be terrified of me. Elena shook her head slowly, maintaining eye contact. Then, deliberate and certain, she raised up on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, like they were both testing the reality of the moment. Then Jae-won made a sound low in his throat and deepened it, his hand sliding into her hair, tilting her head to get a better angle. Elena's fingers clutched his shirt, anchoring herself as the world tilted and reformed around this single point of connection. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jae-won rested his forehead against hers again. "This is a terrible idea," he murmured. Elena grabbed her notepad with shaking hands. "The best things usually are." He laughed, the sound surprised and genuine, and Elena realized she'd never heard him laugh before. It transformed his face, made him look younger, less burdened. "You're going to destroy me," he said, but he was smiling. "Completely unmake everything I've built." "Good," Elena wrote. "You built walls, not a life." The smile faded, replaced by something more intense. "And you think you can teach me the difference?" Elena met his eyes and nodded. Certain. Fearless. That night changed everything. They didn't sleep together, not yet, but something fundamental had shifted. The next morning, Elena woke to find Jae-won in the kitchen making breakfast, and when she appeared in the doorway, he crossed to her immediately and kissed her forehead like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Good morning," he said softly, and Elena felt the words warm her from the inside out. They spent the day in comfortable proximity. Jae-won worked from the living room instead of his office, and Elena curled up on the opposite end of the couch with a book, their feet almost touching. Every so often, she'd catch him watching her, and he'd smile slightly before returning to his laptop. It felt domestic, safe, like they'd been doing this for years instead of days. But safety was an illusion, and they both knew it. The call came that evening. Jae-won answered his phone, listened for 30 seconds, and his entire body went rigid. "When?" A pause. "How many?" Another pause, longer this time. "Increase security. Now, and find out how they got the address." He ended the call and turned to Elena, his face carved from stone. "They know you're here. Someone leaked the location. There's been unusual activity around the building, vehicles circling, cameras surveilling the entrance. They're planning something." Elena's blood went cold. She grabbed her notepad. "I should leave. Lead them away from you." "Absolutely not." Jae-won's voice was sharp. "That's exactly what they want. You alone, vulnerable, easy to eliminate. You're staying here where I can protect you. But if I stay, you're in danger too." "I'm always in danger." He crossed to her, gripping her shoulders. "But I'll be damned if I let anything happen to you. Do you understand? I will burn this entire city down before I let them touch you." The intensity in his voice, the barely contained violence, should have frightened Elena. Instead, she felt something fierce and possessive bloom in her chest. He cared. More than cared. And she was falling in love with him. The realization hit her like a physical blow. It was too fast, too intense, too impossible. You couldn't fall in love with someone in less than a week. But logic didn't matter when Jae-won was looking at her like she was the only thing in the world worth protecting. Elena wrote quickly, "I'm not leaving. We face this together." Something softened in Jae-won's expression. "Together," he repeated, like the word was new to him. Then he pulled her against his chest, holding her tight enough that Elena could feel his heartbeat, rapid and strong. "I need to tell you something about why they want me dead." They sat on the couch, Jae-won's arm around her shoulders, and he told her everything. His father's company had been clean, legitimate, but after his death, Jae-won had discovered embedded corruption. Board members taking bribes, executives running side operations, connections to organized crime. He'd spent 5 years systematically cleaning house, making enemies with every firing, every prosecution, every deal he'd refused. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he said quietly, "making the company clean again. But every criminal I exposed became a threat. And now they're banding together, pooling resources to eliminate the problem. Me. And me because I saw their hired killer," Elena wrote. "Yes. Jae-won's jaw tightened. Which means they won't stop. Not until we're both dead, or they're destroyed. Then we destroy them first. Jae-won looked at her, surprised. You want to fight back? Elena wrote fiercely. I'm tired of running, of being afraid, of being silent while bad people win. If they want to fight, let's give them one. The smile that spread across Jae-won's face was predatory, dangerous, beautiful. God, I knew there was a reason I loved you. The words hung in the air between them. Jae-won seemed to realize what he'd said, his eyes widening slightly, but he didn't take it back. Just watched Elena, waiting. Elena's hands trembled as she wrote, Say it again. I love you. No hesitation this time. Certain. Absolute. I know it's insane. I know it's too fast. But I look at you, and I see everything I thought I'd lost. Compassion, courage, hope. You make me want to be more than just the cold bastard everyone expects. You make me want to be the man you see when you look at me. Elena set down the notepad and kissed him. Harder this time, more desperate, pouring every emotion she couldn't speak into the press of her lips against his. Jae-won responded immediately, his hands framing her face, kissing her like she was oxygen, and he was drowning. They moved together, Elena straddling his lap, their bodies pressed close enough that she could feel every hard line of him. His hands slid under her shirt, warm against her skin, and Elena gasped silently against his mouth. Everything was heat and need and the overwhelming sensation of being wanted, truly wanted, for the first time in her life. Elena. Jae-won's voice was rough, strained. If we don't stop now. She pulled back enough to grab her notepad, writing 2 words. Don't stop. His eyes darkened with desire. Are you sure? Elena nodded, then took his hand and placed it over her heart so he could feel how it raced. So he could understand without words that she wanted this, wanted him, with an intensity that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Jae-won stood in one fluid motion, lifting her with him, and Elena wrapped her legs around his waist as he carried her toward his bedroom. They left a trail of clothes, his shirt, her borrowed sweats, his jeans, and by the time they reached his bed, they were down to skin and desperate touches and kisses that felt like promises. He laid her down gently, like she was something precious, and Elena felt tears prick her eyes at the tenderness. No one had ever touched her like this, like she mattered, like she was worth worshipping. You're beautiful, Jae-won murmured against her throat, her collarbone. Perfect. Mine. Elena's fingers tangled in his hair, holding him close, and when they finally came together, it felt like every piece of her broken past clicking into place. This was what she'd been searching for. Not just safety or protection, but connection, understanding, love. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Jae-won's fingers tracing idle patterns on her shoulder. I need to tell you something else, he said quietly. Elena reached for the notepad he'd thoughtfully left on the nightstand. What? I've been learning sign language. He said it casually, but Elena could hear the nervousness underneath. I hired a tutor. Been practicing every night after you fall asleep. I'm not fluent yet, but... He lifted his hands and signed slowly, carefully. I want to understand you. Elena stared at him, tears streaming down her face. No one had ever, not once in her entire life, had anyone cared enough to learn her language, to meet her in her silence instead of demanding she find ways to accommodate theirs. She took his hands, brought them to her lips, and kissed his palms. Then she signed back, the gestures shaky but clear. I love you too. Jae-won's expression crumbled. He pulled her against his chest, holding her so tight Elena could barely breathe, and she felt wetness against her hair. He was crying. This cold, controlled, dangerous man was crying because she'd signed that she loved him. We're going to survive this, he said fiercely. All of it. The threats, the danger, everything. And then I'm going to spend the rest of my life learning every way to tell you I love you. Sign language, writing, gestures. I'll learn them all. Because you deserve to be heard, Elena. You deserve everything. They spent the night wrapped around each other, talking through signs and written notes and kisses that said more than words ever could. And when dawn broke over the city, Elena woke to find Jae-won already awake, watching her with soft eyes. He signed, "Good morning, beautiful." Elena smiled and signed back, "Good morning." But morning brought reality crashing back. Jae-won's phone rang before they'd even left the bedroom. He answered, listened, and his face went cold. "When?" A pause. "How many casualties?" Another pause. "I'm on my way." He ended the call and turned to Elena, and she could see the barely contained fury in his eyes. "They hit one of my subsidiary offices. Small explosion. 2 security guards injured. It's a message." What kind of message? That they're done being subtle. Jae-won pulled on clothes with sharp, angry movements. "They're escalating, trying to draw me out of hiding. If I go to the office, I'm exposed. If I stay here, they'll keep hurting innocent people until I do." Elena grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. She signed, "We call the police. FBI. Someone." "Already did. They're investigating, but investigations take time we don't have." He gripped her shoulders. "I need to end this. Today. My security team located the man who ordered the hit, a former board member I fired 3 years ago. He's been funding this entire operation, and he's meeting with his associates tonight to plan the next attack. What are you going to do?" "Something I should have done years ago." Jae-won's voice was ice. "I'm going to confront him. With evidence, with witnesses, with enough legal ammunition to bury him and everyone working with him. But it's dangerous, Elena. If things go wrong..." Elena pressed her fingers to his lips, silencing him. Then she signed firmly, "I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not." She signed faster. "You need me. I read people. I'll see threats you miss. We're partners now. Or was all that talk about together just words?" Jae-won stared at her for a long moment, clearly warring with himself. Finally, he sighed. "If you come, you follow every instruction I give. No arguments, no heroics. You stay behind my security team at all times. Agreed?" Elena nodded. "And Elena?" His hands moved in signs she recognized. "If something happens to me, you run. You survive. Promise me." Elena signed back. "Nothing will happen. I won't let it." The meeting was set for a warehouse on the industrial edge of the city. Jae-won's security team did 3 sweeps before allowing them to enter, and even then, Elena could feel the tension radiating off every armed guard. They were walking into enemy territory, and everyone knew it. The warehouse was mostly empty, just a table in the center where 3 men waited. Elena recognized the gray-suited man from the restaurant immediately, and her blood ran cold. He smiled when he saw her, a predator's smile, and she stepped closer to Jae-won instinctively. Kim Jae-won. The man at the center of the table stood, older, distinguished, with silver hair and a face that probably inspired trust in boardrooms. "You're either very brave or very stupid to come here." "I'm efficient," Jae-won replied coldly. "You want me dead. I want you in prison. Let's save everyone time and resolve this now." The older man laughed. "You think you can just arrest me? I have lawyers, connections, judges in my pocket. You have nothing but arrogance and a mute whore you picked up at a restaurant." Elena felt Jae-won tense beside her, his entire body coiling like a spring ready to snap. But when he spoke, his voice remained controlled. "I have evidence. Financial records proving you've been embezzling from the company for 15 years. Communication logs showing you ordered my assassination. Witness testimony from 5 former associates who've agreed to testify in exchange for immunity." The smile faded from the older man's face. "And most importantly, Jae-won continued, pulling out his phone and pressing a button. I have this entire conversation being live-streamed to the FBI, the SEC, and every major news outlet in the country. You're done, Chairman Park. You just confessed to attempted murder on camera. Chaos erupted. The gray-suited man lunged for Jae-won, but security intercepted him. Chairman Park tried to run, but the doors burst open, revealing FBI agents with weapons drawn. Elena watched it all unfold with a strange sense of detachment. Her body flooded with so much adrenaline she felt weightless. Then she saw it. The fourth man she hadn't noticed, hiding in the shadows, raising a gun toward Jae-won's back. Elena moved without thinking. She slammed into Jae-won, knocking him sideways just as the shot rang out. Pain exploded in her shoulder, white-hot and consuming, and she collapsed. Jae-won's scream was the last thing she heard before the world went dark. She woke in a hospital room, the steady beep of monitors the first sound to penetrate the fog. Everything hurt, but especially her left shoulder, which felt like someone had set it on fire and then wrapped it in concrete. Elena. She turned her head and saw Jae-won sitting beside the bed, his hand gripping hers. He looked terrible, dark circles under his eyes, clothes rumpled, hair disheveled, like he hadn't left her side since they'd arrived. He signed slowly. You're awake. Thank God, you're awake. Elena tried to smile, but her mouth felt dry. A nurse appeared with water, helped her drink, and then discreetly left them alone. You took a bullet for me, Jae-won said, his voice breaking. You nearly died. The doctors said another inch and it would have hit an artery. Elena, you could have... He stopped, unable to finish. Elena squeezed his hand weakly and signed, with her good arm, but I didn't. We're both alive. Because you saved me. Again. Jae-won brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. You saved me twice now, and I don't even know how to begin repaying that debt. Elena signed, not a debt. Love doesn't keep score. No, he agreed softly. It doesn't. He signed, Chairman Park is in custody. So are all his associates. The FBI has enough evidence to lock them away for decades. It's over, Elena. The threat is gone. You're safe. We're safe, Elena corrected. We're safe, Jae-won repeated. He climbed carefully onto the hospital bed beside her, mindful of her injury, and wrapped his arm around her waist. And when you're healed, I'm taking you somewhere far away from here. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere you can just be without fear or danger, or anyone trying to hurt you. Elena signed, Home. Wherever you are is home. Jae-won pressed his forehead to hers. I love you, and I'm going to spend every day proving it. The recovery took weeks. Jae-won barely left her side, hiring the best physical therapists, making sure she had everything she needed. He practiced sign language religiously, and by the time Elena was cleared to leave the hospital, they could have entire conversations without a notepad. True to his word, he took her away, to a house on the coast where the ocean stretched endlessly, and the only sounds were waves and seabirds. They spent lazy mornings in bed, afternoons walking on the beach, evenings watching sunsets from the porch. One night, 6 months after the shooting, Jae-won found Elena on the porch and sat beside her. He signed, I have something to tell you. Elena raised an eyebrow. Should I be worried? No, excited maybe. He smiled. I started a foundation for trauma survivors, therapy, resources, job training, everything you needed when you were younger and couldn't find. I want to help people like you, like people who've been silenced. Elena's eyes filled with tears. She signed, That's beautiful. I want you to run it, Jae-won continued. If you want to. I know it might be difficult, being the face of something so public, but you understand these people in ways I never could. You could change lives, Elena. She thought about it, about the terrified, silent girl she'd been, moving from city to city with no support and no hope. About how different her life might have been if someone had seen her, really seen her, and offered help. Elena signed, Yes, I want to do this. Jae-won's smile was brighter than the sunset. Then we'll do it together. The foundation launched a year later. Elena did become the face of it, though she never spoke publicly. She didn't need to. Her story spoke for itself. The mute waitress who'd saved a billionaire and ended up saving herself in the process. But the real miracle came on a quiet Tuesday evening, 2 years after that night in the restaurant. Elena was in the foundation's office reviewing applications when Jae-won walked in. He signed, "Come with me, I want to show you something." He led her to a small auditorium where 20 people sat waiting. All trauma survivors, all nonverbal, all learning sign language together. They'd started a support group, a community where silence wasn't a disability, but a shared language. Elena watched them signing to each other, laughing soundlessly, and felt something break open in her chest. This was what she'd needed all those years. This was home. Jae-won's arm slipped around her waist. He signed with his free hand. You did this. You gave them a voice. Elena turned to look at him. This man who'd learned her language, who'd protected her, who'd loved her through danger and fear and everything after. And for the first time in 14 years, she felt words forming in her throat. Jae-won. The sound was barely audible, rough from disuse, but it was there. Her voice. Her actual voice. He froze, his eyes going wide with shock. Elena, he whispered. She tried again, stronger this time. I love you. Jae-won's composure shattered completely. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe, and she felt his tears on her neck. Say it again, he pleaded. Please, say it again. I love you, Elena repeated, and the words felt like freedom, like healing. I love you. I love you. I love you. They stood there in the back of the auditorium, holding each other while tears streamed down both their faces. Elena had found her voice, but more importantly, she'd found someone who'd loved her even when she had none. She'd lived in silence once, but she was never unheard again. Years later, people would ask Jae-won about that night in the restaurant, the night that changed everything. He'd smile and sign his answer, even though he could speak. She saved my life twice. Once from poison, once from loneliness. Everything good in my world exists because she was brave enough to switch a glass. And Elena, standing beside him, would add in her quiet, hard-won voice. He saved mine too. He taught me that silence isn't emptiness. It's just a different way of being heard. They'd built an empire of healing together. The foundation had helped thousands of trauma survivors find their paths forward. But their greatest achievement wasn't measured in success stories or media coverage. It was measured in the way they looked at each other across crowded rooms, signing I love you when they thought no one was watching. It was measured in the home they'd built together, filled with laughter and the comfortable silence of 2 people who'd learned each other's languages perfectly. It was measured in the life they'd created, not despite the danger and fear and trauma that had brought them together, but because of it. Because sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with a warning in someone's eyes and a choice to be brave. If you enjoyed this emotional journey of love, protection, and finding your voice, don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming romance stories. Drop a comment below telling us your favorite moment. Was it the first kiss, the sign language reveal, or when Elena spoke for the first time? And hit that like button to help others discover this story of silent strength and powerful love.